I spent my 33rd birthday screaming in my kitchen while the smell of lavender soap mixed with the scent of scalded skin. Everyone said it was an accident. Just my clumsy little sister, Lila, tripping. But accidents don't come with a smirk that vanishes the second the water hits. It took a second-degree burn for me to realize that in my family, pain wasn't a tragedy, it was a currency. I wanted invisible boundaries for my 33rd birthday. I did not want a gala, a blowout, or a spectacle. I wanted my rented townhome in Glen Haven, Maryland, to feel like a sanctuary, not a stage. I wanted the string lights on my small backyard patio to glow softly over people who actually knew me, not just the version of me that existed to service the family reputation. I insisted on the term low-key when I sent the text to my mother and sister. I should have known that to the Henderson women. Low-key was just a challenge to be overcome. The evening started with a fragile kind of hope. It was late September, and the humidity that usually choked the Chesapeake Bay area had finally broken, leaving the air crisp and smelling of dry leaves. I had spent the morning cleaning the baseboards and arranging flowers I had bought for myself at the farmer's market. My boyfriend, Evan, was handling the grill. Watching him through the sliding glass door, I felt a rare sense of settlement. We had been dating for 8 months, which in my timeline was significant, but in my family's timeline was barely a blip worth mentioning. Evan was steady. He was an auditor by trade, a man who found comfort in things balancing out. He did not know yet that my family operated on a deficit that could never be reconciled. My best friend Maya arrived first, carrying a bottle of Cabernet and a look of protective skepticism. Maya had known me since college. She had seen me through the panic attacks of my 20s and the financial drain of my mother's constant emergencies. "You look tense," Maya said, handing me the wine. "Your shoulders are touching your ears." "They are coming," I said. I was chopping lemons at the counter, the knife moving a little too fast. Mom promised to bring a salad. Just a salad. That is it. Maya raised an eyebrow. Diane Henderson bringing just a salad? I will believe it when I see it. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. It wasn't my mother. It was Lila. My sister was 31, 2 years younger than me, but she had mastered the art of sucking the oxygen out of a room before she even finished kindergarten. She breezed through the front door in a dress that was slightly too formal for a backyard barbecue. Her phone already held aloft like a lantern. "Happy birthday to the responsible one," she announced to her camera. "Not to me." She panned the lens around my living room, lingering on the slightly worn arm of my sofa before flipping the camera to capture her own perfectly highlighted cheekbones. So cute, so cozy. "We are keeping it humble this year." She cut the recording and dropped the smile instantly. "Traffic was a nightmare," Lila said, tossing her purse onto the entryway table I had just dusted. "I need a drink. Is that Evan outside?" She didn't wait for an answer. She walked straight to the sliding glass door. I watched as she tapped on the glass, waving enthusiastically at my boyfriend. When Evan looked up and waved back, Lila raised her phone again, zooming in on him. I felt a prickle of irritation, hot and familiar. It was not jealousy. Exactly. It was the exhaustion of knowing that nothing I had was allowed to remain simply mine. If I had something good, Lila had to document it, critique it, or co-opt it. "Mom is parking." Lila threw over her shoulder. "She brought the stock pot." I froze. "The stock pot?" "I told her I was making the food. I told her specifically not to bring anything heavy." Lila shrugged, opening the fridge and helping herself to a seltzer. "You know how she is." "She made her seafood boil. She said your little grilled chicken things wouldn't be enough for actual adults." The front door opened again, and Diane Henderson made her entrance. My mother was a small woman with a presence that took up the entire hallway. She was carrying a massive, industrial-sized stainless steel stock pot, her knuckles white against the handles. "Nora, grab this," she commanded, bypassing a hello. "It is sloshing." I rushed forward, taking the heavy pot from her. It was hot to the touch. The smell of Old Bay seasoning and boiling potatoes instantly overpowered the scent of the lemons I had been slicing. "Mom," I said, setting it down on the stove with a heavy clunk. "I have everything planned. The grill is going. There is no room for this. Diane patted her hair, checking her reflection in the microwave door. Do not be ungrateful. Nora, it is your birthday. I wanted to make sure people were actually fed. That little grill of yours takes forever. We will just keep this simmering on the back burner. Where is the ladle? I need the big ladle. She began opening my drawers, rearranging my utensils to find what she wanted. I stood there, 33 years old, paying my own rent, building my own career in marketing, yet feeling instantly reduced to a 12-year-old being scolded for not setting the table correctly. I swallowed the retort building in my throat. It was my birthday. I would not let them ruin it. I would survive the night, smile at the right moments, and then go back to my quiet life. Whatever you need. Mom, I said. The party moved outside. The sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the small patio. My coworkers, Ben and Sarah, had arrived, blending in with Maya and her husband. The conversation was light, the kind of easy rhythm I loved, but the atmosphere shifted the moment my mother and sister stepped onto the concrete. They did not join the circle, they broke it. Diane critiqued the doneness of the chicken Evan was serving, loudly enough that he paused mid-flip. Lila sat in the best chair, the wicker throne at the head of the table, and positioned her phone against a citronella candle to record a time-lapse of the evening. So, Evan, Lila said, her voice pitched to Carrie, how are you handling Nora's little quirks? She can be so particular about how the towels are folded. It drives us crazy. Evan smiled, polite but firm. I actually like that she is organized. It makes life easier. Lila laughed, a sound that tinkled like broken glass. Oh, sure, organized. That is a nice word for it. We always just called it controlling. But honestly, Nora, you are so lucky someone finally chose you. We were starting to worry you'd be the spinster aunt forever. The table went quiet. Ben looked at his drink. Maya's jaw tightened. Lila, Maya said sharply, that is a weird thing to say. I'm just teasing. Lila threw her hands up, looking at the camera she had running. God, everyone is so serious. It is a joke. Nora knows I am joking. Right. Nora? I forced a smile. It felt like stretching rubber over a skull. Right. Hilarious. Diane chimed in, oblivious to the tension, or perhaps enjoying it. Well, Nora has always been a late bloomer. Remember when she tried to learn piano? She quit after 2 months because the teacher said she had stiff fingers. That is not what happened, I said, my voice quiet. The teacher moved away. Diane waved a hand, dismissing my memory. No, honey, you quit. You just do not remember it correctly. You have always had a selective memory to protect your feelings. She looked around the table, beaming. Nora creates her own little world in her head. We just let her live in it. I looked at Evan. He was watching my mother with a look of clinical fascination, like he was auditing a fraudulent tax return. He reached under the table and squeezed my hand. That small pressure was the only thing keeping me from screaming. I need to check the food, I said. Standing up abruptly, I walked back into the kitchen, the screen door sliding shut behind me. Muttering silence, I leaned against the counter and took a deep breath. The kitchen was hot. The giant stock pot my mother had brought was bubbling on the back burner, sending plumes of steam into the microwave hood. It was an aggressive object, oversized and out of place in my sleek, compact kitchen. I started organizing the dessert plates, trying to regulate my breathing. Count to 10. 1, 2, 3. The screen door slid open. Lila walked in. You are being rude, she said. She wasn't holding her phone now. Her face was slack, bored. Mom is trying to do something nice for you, and you are sulking in here. I am not sulking, I said, keeping my back to her. I am getting dessert ready, and I asked you guys not to bring the big pot. I don't have space for it. Lila sighed. She walked over to the stove. She lifted the lid of the stock pot, peering into the roiling boil of corn and shrimp. It smells better than that dry chicken. You should be grateful. She picked up a wooden spoon and stirred it lazily. Then, she looked at me. Her eyes were flat. There was no sparkle, no sisterly warmth, just a cold assessment. Evan seems nice, she said. He is, I replied. Does he know about the debt? She asked. I turned around slowly. What debt? Lila smirked. Mom's debt. The money she owes on the credit cards she used to pay for your college tuition. She mentions it all the time. How she is still paying for your education. My stomach dropped. I paid my own tuition. I worked 3 jobs. I took out loans in my own name. Mom never paid a dime. Lila shrugged. That is not how she tells it. And honestly, Nora, who are people going to believe? The poor widow trying to help her daughter? Or the girl who claims she did it all herself? She was baiting me. I knew she was baiting me. It was a game they played. Rewrite history until I snapped. Then blame me for snapping. I am going back outside, I said, picking up the stack of plates. Please leave the stove alone. I turned to walk toward the door. Wait, let me help, Lila said. Her voice changed instantly, pitching up an octave, loud enough to be heard if anyone was listening from the patio. I can handle the kitchen. Nora, go enjoy your party. She stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the door. She wasn't helping. She was corralling. Move, Lila, I said quietly. She reached out and grabbed the edge of the stockpot. I'm just going to move this to the front burner so it is easier to serve. It is too far back. No, don't touch it. I said, it is heavy. Lila ignored me. She grabbed the handles of the pot with 2 dish towels, but she didn't move it to the front burner. She slid it awkwardly toward the edge of the counter. The peninsula that separated the kitchen workspace from the hallway where I was standing. The pot was massive, gallons of water, potatoes, corn, shrimp, boiling. Lila, stop, I said. Stepping back, she looked at me. For a second, her eyes locked onto mine. Then she looked down at the pot, then back at me. Oops, she whispered. She stumbled. It looked theatrical, a pantomime of a stumble. Her hip checked the side of the counter, and her hands slipped from the towel-wrapped handles. The pot didn't just fall. It tipped. The trajectory was precise. It pivoted on the edge of the granite and capsized forward. Time didn't slow down. That is a cliché people use in movies. Time sped up. The water hit me before my brain registered that the pot was moving. It hit my left forearm first, then splashed across my stomach and down my left thigh. The sound was what I remembered first. Not a splash, but a heavy, wet slap. Then the heat. It wasn't pain at first. It was a shock so profound my vision went white. My brain couldn't process the temperature. It just registered that my skin was suddenly wrong. It felt like being wrapped in a blanket made of lightning. Then the scream tore out of me. It scraped my throat raw. I backed up, clawing at my shirt, trying to get the boiling fabric off my skin, but the water had soaked through instantly. The silence that followed my scream was absolute. The chatter on the patio cut off, as if a wire had been severed. I fell to my knees, gasping, holding my arm away from my body. The skin on my forearm was already changing, angry red, blistering, peeling back in wet sheets. Lila was standing over the overturned pot. Steam rose around her like fog. She wasn't rushing to get ice. She wasn't calling for help. She was looking at me with her hand over her mouth. Oh my God, she said. Her voice was steady. Don't overreact. Nora, it is just water. Just water. The sliding door burst open. Evan was there first, his eyes wide with horror. Maya was right behind him. Nora! Evan shouted, dropping to his knees beside me. He reached for me, then stopped, terrified to touch the burns. Get her to the sink, Maya screamed. Cold water, now! They dragged me to the sink. The movement sent fresh waves of agony through my nerves. Every nerve ending in my arm was firing a signal of catastrophic failure. Evan turned on the faucet and thrust my arm under the spray. The relief was microscopic compared to the pain. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Diane appeared in the doorway. She looked at the mess on the floor, the shrimp, the corn, the puddle of boiling water spreading toward the rugs. Look at this mess, she said. Her tone was one of annoyance, not concern. Nora, why were you messing with the pot? I told you it was heavy. I couldn't speak. I was hyperventilating. She is hurt. Diane, Maya yelled, spinning around. Look at her arm. We need to go to the hospital. Diane stepped closer. Peering at my arm, she wrinkled her nose. It is just a scald. Put some butter on it. She is fine. Nora has always been sensitive to pain. No butter, Evan roared. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice. We are going to the ER. Now. The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights, and Evan's hand gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. Maya sat in the back, leaning forward, whispering to me to breathe. Diane and Lila followed in their own car. At the urgent care, they took one look at the blistering and sent us immediately to the larger hospital with a burn unit. The triage nurse took one look at my arm and torso and called for a wheelchair immediately. 2nd degree, bordering on 3rd in places. They put me in a room with fluorescent lights that hummed. The pain was a living thing now, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. A doctor was cutting away the remnants of my shirt. Diane and Lila pushed their way into the room before the nurse could stop them. She is okay, right? Diane asked the doctor, stepping in front of Evan. She is prone to drama. We just want to make sure she isn't working herself up. The doctor, a stern woman with gray hair, didn't look up from my arm. She has severe partial thickness burns. This is not drama. Ma'am, this is trauma. Please step back. Lila was standing in the corner. She was crying, loud, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. It was so scary. She wailed, loud enough that heads turned in the hallway. I tried to catch it. I tried to save her. I feel so terrible. A nurse moved to comfort her, handing her a tissue. It was an accident. Honey, you couldn't help it. I watched through a haze of pain medication they had just administered. I watched the nurse pat Lila's shoulder. I watched Lila lean into the comfort, her eyes squeezing shut, her face a mask of tragic guilt. She was stealing the sympathy. I was the one with the skin peeling off my body, but Lila was the victim of the traumatic event. Diane leaned over the bed rails. Stop crying. Lila, Nora is fine. See? She is not even crying. I wasn't crying because I was in shock. I wasn't crying because if I started, I didn't think I would ever stop. The doctor wrapped my arm in Silvadene and thick bandages. She explained the care instructions, debridement, infection risk, scarring. She talked about pain management. I kept seeing the moment the pot tipped. The physics of it didn't make sense. If she slipped, the pot should have fallen straight down, or backward. To tip it forward, over the lip of the counter, required force. It required a push. Hours later, I was discharged. My arm was a white club of gauze. My stomach was bandaged. Evan drove me home. Maya followed to help get me settled. Diane and Lila had left an hour earlier, Diane complaining that the hospital chairs were hurting her back. Back at the townhome, the smell of Old Bay still lingered in the air, sickeningly heavy. The mess had been cleaned up, likely by Ben and Sarah before they left, but the floor was still sticky. I sat on the sofa, propped up by pillows. Evan went upstairs to get my prescription filled at the 24-hour pharmacy. Maya sat on the coffee table in front of me. She looked tired. Her makeup was smudged. "Nora," she said softly. I looked at her. "Yeah?" "I saw something. I closed my eyes. I don't want to talk about it." "Maya, you need to hear this," she insisted. "I was coming back from the bathroom. I was in the hallway. I saw Lila in the kitchen with you. I opened my eyes. She didn't slip. Nora, the air in the room felt very cold." "What do you mean?" Maya leaned in, her voice a whisper. I saw her face right before the pot moved. She looked focused. She braced her hip against the counter, and then she shoved it. It was quick, but I saw her check to see where you were standing first. I shook my head. "That is crazy. Lila is selfish. But she wouldn't burn me." Maya hesitated. Then she said the thing that made my blood run cold. "When you screamed, I saw her smirk. It was there for like a millisecond. Before she put her hands over her mouth, she looked satisfied. I felt nausea rise in my throat. Maya, stop. Please. Maya reached out and touched my uninjured knee. I am just telling you what I saw. Be careful. Nora, that night, I didn't sleep. The pain medication took the edge off, but the throbbing was constant. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Evan was asleep beside me, his breathing rhythmic and safe. I replayed the scene in the kitchen, the conversation about the debt, the way she blocked the door, the way she ignored my warning about the weight of the pot. Don't overreact. That was what she said. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry. The next morning, the sun was offensively bright. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand with my good hand. I opened Instagram. It was muscle memory. There was a new story on Lila's profile, posted 3 hours ago. It was a black screen with white text. Family is so hard sometimes. It is exhausting when you have to walk on eggshells around fragile people who turn every accident into a tragedy. Sending love to everyone dealing with drama today. Boundaries, family trauma. There were dozens of heart reactions already. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Diane. How is the arm? Listen, do not make a big thing of this with the family. Aunt Elaine is already asking questions because Maya ran her mouth. Tell everyone it was just a clumsy accident. We do not need people thinking Lila is careless. It reflects badly on all of us. Love you. She wasn't asking if I was in pain. She was managing the PR. I put the phone down. I looked at my bandaged arm. I thought about the scars the doctor said I might have. Permanent marks on my skin because Lila decided to teach me a lesson about... What? About leaving the party? About having a boyfriend she couldn't charm? I felt something crack inside me. It wasn't a bone. It was the structure of my compliance. For 33 years. I had held the family together by absorbing the shocks. I was the bumper car. I was the insulation. But insulation burns. I picked up my phone again. I didn't reply to Diane. I didn't reply to Lila's story. I opened the Notes app. I created a new note. I typed the header, the birthday incident. Then I began to type. 1. The pot. Location, back burner. Initially, moved by Lila to the front edge of the peninsula. Diane's instruction. Keep it simmering. Lila's action. Moved it despite being told no. 2. The motion. Lila claimed she slipped. There was no water on the floor prior to the spill. Her shoes were rubber-soled wedges. The angle of the fall was forward thrusting, not downward. 3. The witness. Maya Rhodes saw Lila brace her hip. Maya saw Lila check my position. Maya saw a smirk. 4. The aftermath. Lila's first words. Don't overreact. Diane's first reaction. Concern for the mess, then minimizing the injury to medical staff. I stared at the words. They looked cold, clinical. They looked like the audit reports Evan brought home. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this list. I wasn't a vengeful person. I was the peacemaker. I was the one who fixed things. But as a fresh wave of fire radiated up my arm, I realized something. You cannot make peace with people who are waging war on you. You can only surrender, or you can fight back. I typed one last line at the bottom of the note. 5. The motive. To be determined. I locked my phone and set it back on the nightstand. Outside, a bird was singing, downstairs. I could hear Evan making coffee. My arm was burning, but for the first time in my life, my mind was ice cold. The routine of burn care became my new religion, a liturgy of unwrapping, cleansing, and rewrapping that consumed my mornings before the sun had even fully risen. 2 weeks after my birthday. My left arm was a landscape I barely recognized. The skin was angry and mottled, a topography of raw nerve endings that reacted to the slightest shift in air pressure. Every appointment at the burn clinic was a humiliation. I had to sit in a plastic chair while a nurse named Brenda, who had gentle hands but a voice devoid of pity, scraped away the dead tissue. They called it debridement. It felt like being erased, layer by layer. Returning to Kestrel and Row Marketing felt like stepping onto a moving walkway while wearing roller skates. I had taken 10 days off, eating through my accrued sick leave, and when I walked back into the open plan office, The fluorescent lights seemed to hum at a frequency that vibrated directly against my skull. I wore a long-sleeved, oversized cardigan, the left sleeve carefully cut and pinned to accommodate the bulk of the bandages, but I still felt exposed. I felt like a neon sign blinking victim. I settled at my desk, trying to arrange my keyboard so I could type one-handed. My inbox was a disaster zone of 300 unread emails. I was deleting a newsletter when a shadow fell across my monitor. It was Greg, a senior account manager who had always been kind to me in a distant, water cooler sort of way. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Hey, Nora," Greg said. "Good to see you back." "Thanks, Greg," I said, forcing a professional brightness I did not feel, just trying to catch up. He hesitated, looking around to make sure no one was within earshot. He pulled up a rolling chair and sat down, lowering his voice. "Listen, this is awkward," he said, "but I wanted to give you a heads up. I got a message on LinkedIn a few days ago, from your sister." My fingers froze over the keys. "Lila?" "Yeah," Greg said. "Lila Henderson. I didn't know you guys were connected. She sent me this long note. She said she was really worried about you. She said you were struggling with some mental health stuff and that the accident at your party was a result of a breakdown." The air left the room. It felt as if the ceiling had lowered 2 feet. "She asked me to keep an eye on you," Greg continued, looking at his hands. "She said she was afraid you might be unstable at work." I didn't reply. Obviously, it felt weird, but I thought you should know. I stared at him, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Lila wasn't just spinning the story for our family. She was seeding it in my professional life. She was preemptively destroying my credibility. If I made a mistake on a report, or if I snapped at a colleague, it wouldn't be seen as stress or a bad day. It would be seen as a symptom. "Thank you for telling me, Greg," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from inside a tin can. "My sister and I have a complicated relationship. She tends to exaggerate." Greg nodded, standing up. "Yeah, families, right? Just take care of yourself." "Nora," when he walked away, I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. This was not just a pot of water anymore. This was a siege. That evening, Evan came over with Thai food. He set the cartons on the counter, carefully avoiding the spot where the pot had sat, and watched me as I struggled to open a bottle of water. He took it from my hand, twisted the cap, and handed it back without a word. Since the party, Evan had been a rock. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't tell me everything happened for a reason. He simply showed up, but I could feel myself shrinking away from him. I felt grotesque. I felt heavy with drama. I was the girlfriend with the burn scars and the crazy family, the baggage that no 35-year-old man wanted to carry. "I am sorry about the mess," I said, gesturing vaguely to the stack of mail I hadn't opened. "I am just so tired. You have second-degree burns." "Nora," Evan said, dishing pad thai onto plates, "you are allowed to be tired." I sat at the table, picking at a piece of tofu. Greg told me today that Lila messaged him. She told him I was having a mental breakdown. Evan stopped chewing. He put his fork down slowly. "She contacted your employer?" I nodded, fighting the sting of tears. "She is trying to paint me as unstable. That way, if I say anything about what really happened, no one will believe me. I will just be the crazy sister having an episode." Evan looked at me, his eyes dark and serious. He was an auditor. He dealt in facts, in trails of evidence. He didn't dismiss me. He didn't tell me I was being paranoid. "Nora," he said, "this level of calculation, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't just wake up one day and decide to scald your sister and then gaslight her boss." "What else has she done?" I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what is the pattern?" Evan asked. "If this is a strategy, she has tested it before. Tell me." I closed my eyes and let the memories drift up from the places I had buried them. For years, I had categorized Lila's behavior as quirky or thoughtless. I had bought into the family narrative that Lila was just a free spirit who didn't understand consequences, but looking at it through the lens of my burned arm, the picture shifted. There was my college graduation, I said quietly, "Lila forgot to mail the invitations to the extended family. Mom gave them to her, and she just lost them. So nobody came except Mom and Lila." Mom spent the whole dinner comforting Lila because she felt so guilty about her mistake. I ended up consoling her on my own graduation night. Evan nodded. "Go on. When I got promoted 2 years ago, I told her in confidence before I signed the contract. I said, "The next day, Aunt Elaine called me asking why I was quitting my job. Lila had told everyone I was fired. She said she must have misunderstood." "And the money?" Evan asked. "I pay for everything," I admitted. "Every crisis. When Lila's car broke down, Mom called me crying saying Lila couldn't get to work. When Mom needed dental work, she said she was short on cash, but Lila always has new clothes. She always has the latest phone." I stopped, the realization settling like lead in my stomach. I was the resource. I was the battery they drained to keep their own lights on. And whenever I tried to unplug, they manufactured a crisis to pull me back in. "It is a system," Evan said. He reached across the table and took my good hand. "And you stopped playing your part. You set a boundary about the party. You tried to make it about you. That is why she escalated." Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize. I put it on speaker. "Hello? Ms. Henderson? This is Mr. Russo, your landlord." My stomach tightened. "Hi, Mr. Russo. Is everything okay?" "Actually, no," he said. His voice was stiff. "I received a formal complaint today regarding noise violations and unauthorized guests at your property." I blinked. "What? Mr. Russo? I haven't had anyone over. I have been recovering from an injury. The complaint states there was screaming and shouting late last night," he said, "and that you have been running a commercial catering operation from the kitchen. It says there are large stock pots and industrial equipment being moved in and out." I looked at the empty kitchen. The only stock pot that had ever been there was my mother's. "Mr. Russo, that is insane," I said, my voice rising. "I am not running a catering business, and I was asleep last night. Who made this complaint?" "I cannot disclose that," he said, "but given the severity of the allegations, I have to issue a warning. If I get another one, we are going to have to talk about lease termination." He hung up. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in the silence. Only 2 people knew about the stock pot. I whispered, only 2 people knew that specific detail. Evan's face was hard. "She is trying to take your home, Nora. She is trying to destabilize you completely." 2 days later, Maya came over. She looked grim, clutching her phone like it was a weapon. "I found it," she said, walking through the door without knocking. "Found what?" I was sitting on the sofa, trying to ignore the itching under my bandages. "The clip," she said. "I went through every video I took that night. Most of it is just people talking. But I was filming Ben telling that stupid fishing story, and the camera drifted." She sat next to me and held up the screen. "Look at the background, top left corner." I squinted. The video was shaky, focused on Ben's animated face. But in the blurred background, through the sliding glass door, you could see the kitchen. You could see the back of my mother's head as she looked into the fridge. And you could see Lila. She was standing by the stove. The video was grainy, but the movement was distinct. She looked over her shoulder, checking the room. Then she used 2 hands to slide the silver pot from the back burner to the front edge of the counter. She didn't struggle with the weight. She moved it with precision. Then she leaned her hip against the counter. Right next to it, the video cut off. She moved it. I said, the air felt thin. She told everyone it was already there. She told everyone she was just stirring it. She staged the scene. Maya said, "She set the trap and waited for you to walk into it." It contradicts her entire story. It wasn't a smoking gun. It didn't show the push. But it proved premeditation. It proved she lied about the initial placement. "I need to talk to Mom," I said. "If I show her this, she has to believe me." Maya looked skeptical. "Nora, your mother is the one who brought the pot. Do not expect her to be the judge here. She is the co-conspirator." I didn't want to believe that. Diane was difficult. Yes, she was critical. But she was my mother. Surely, If she knew Lila had deliberately hurt me, she would stop protecting her. I called Diane the next morning. I waited until I was calm. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say. "Mom, I need you to listen to me." I started. "Oh, Nora." Diane sighed. She sounded exhausted, as if my injury was a personal inconvenience to her. "I really do not have the energy for a rehash today. Lila has been crying all morning. She feels so attacked by your vibes." "My vibes?" I repeated. "Mom, I have second-degree burns. Lila messaged my boss saying I was crazy. Someone called my landlord." Diane made a tisking sound. "You are being paranoid. Lila is just concerned. She thinks you are spiraling. And honestly, Nora, you are obsessing over an accident. You need to apologize to your sister for making her feel like a criminal." "Apologize?" My voice cracked. She poured boiling water on me. "She tripped," Diane snapped. "And now you are running around trying to ruin the family reputation. Aunt Elaine called me asking if we were being sued. Do you know how embarrassing that is for me? To have my own daughter acting like a litigant?" "I have a video." "Mom," I said, "it shows Lila moving the pot when you weren't looking." She set it up. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. "You really are sick," Diane said finally. Her voice was ice. "You would doctor a video just to hurt your sister? I think you need professional help. Nora, serious help. Do not call me until you are ready to act like a daughter." The line went dead. I sat there, the phone warm in my hand. She didn't even ask to see it. She decided I was a liar because the truth was too inconvenient for her reality. I called Leah Kim an hour later. Leah was a personal injury attorney Evan had recommended. Her office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a chiropractor and a notary, but inside it was clean, sharp, and smelled of lemon polish. Leah was a woman in her 40s with glasses she perched on the end of her nose and a way of looking at you that made you feel like she was reading your bone marrow. I told her everything: the party, the pot, the text messages, the landlord call, the video. Leah took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching rhythmically. When I finished, she sat back and took off her glasses. "Here is the hard truth. Nora," she said, "proving intent in a tort case is incredibly difficult. Unless we have a witness who saw her say, 'I am going to burn her,' a jury is likely to see this as a tragic accident between siblings. The defense, if it went that far, would paint you as jealous and litigious." I felt my shoulders slump. "So I can do nothing?" "I didn't say that," Leah said. She tapped the pad. "We might not get a criminal conviction for assault, but we can build a case for negligence, gross negligence, and more importantly, we can build a shield." She leaned forward. "You are being harassed. The landlord call, the workplace interference, that is actionable. But we need documentation. I want you to save every text, every email, every voicemail. Screenshot the social media posts before she deletes them. Get statements from the guests." She paused. "And we need to look at the money. Abuse like this rarely happens in a vacuum. Usually, there is a financial component. Is there anything tying you to them financially?" "No," I said. "I have been independent for years." "Check," Leah said. "Check everything. Insurance, credit reports, titles. People who feel entitled to your body usually feel entitled to your wallet, too." When I got home, the mail was waiting. There was a thick envelope from my health insurance provider. I opened it, expecting the usual explanation of benefits for my ER visit. Instead, I found a rejection letter, claim denied, out-of-network provider, patient responsibility, $12,400. I stared at the number. That couldn't be right. I had gone to the hospital in my network. I had checked. Then I saw the policy number listed on the claim. It wasn't my policy. It was an old family plan number, one that had expired 5 years ago when I aged out. I called the hospital billing department immediately. "Hi, this is Nora Henderson. I am calling about a bill. You have the wrong insurance information on file." The representative clicked away on her keyboard. "Ms. Henderson, we initially had your employer's insurance, but a woman called the next day." "A Diane Henderson?" She identified herself as your mother in proxy. She instructed us to switch the billing to a different policy number. She said she was handling it. I felt the blood drain from my face. She changed it? Why would she do that? She said it was the primary family coverage. The representative said, unfortunately, because that policy is inactive. The claim was rejected, and since the filing window for your actual insurance was complicated by the switch, you are currently showing as self-pay. She sabotaged my insurance. She deliberately switched the billing to a dead policy to saddle me with the debt. It was a punishment, a $12,000 fine for getting hurt. I didn't call Diane. I knew what she would say. She would say it was a mistake. She would say she was trying to help. She would say I was ungrateful. Instead, I sat down at my computer and began to type messages to the guests who had been at the party. I kept it casual, just like Leah suggested. Hey, just trying to fill in some blanks for the doctor regarding the mechanics of the fall. Do you remember exactly where the pot was before it tipped? The replies trickled in over the next 24 hours. Ben wrote, honestly, I was watching the game, but I remember thinking it was weird how the pot was hanging off the edge, like teetering. Sarah wrote, I didn't see the fall, but I remember your mom telling the EMTs that you fainted. She said you have a history of fainting spells. Is that true? I froze. Fainted. Diane had told the emergency responders I fainted. That was why they hadn't questioned the physics of the fall. If I fainted and pulled the pot down on myself, the forward tip made sense. She had planted the explanation before I was even loaded into the ambulance. Then came a text from a friend of a friend. A guy named Mike. Hey Nora, hope you are healing. This is weird, but your sister was acting strange right before it happened. I was in the kitchen grabbing a beer. She was staring at the pot, like intensely focused. She didn't see me. She was muttering something. It sounded like, just do it. I thought she was psyching herself up to cook or something. Then 10 seconds later, you screamed, just do it. I put the phone down. I looked at the pile of papers on my desk, the denied insurance claim, the landlord warning, the notes from Leah Kim. I realized then that the scalding water was not the end of the attack. It was the opening salvo. They were building a narrative cage around me. If I stayed silent, I was the clumsy, fainting daughter who needed her mother's financial management and her sister's pity. I would be the victim they could nurse and control. If I spoke up, if I showed the video or fought the insurance fraud, I became the unstable, paranoid aggressor attacking her own family. They had rigged the game so that any move I made tightened the noose. But they had made one mistake. They assumed I was the same Nora who had spent 30 years apologizing for taking up space. They didn't know that the heat had burned that version of me away. I picked up the insurance bill. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I scanned it into my computer and saved it in a folder named Evidence. Then I opened my browser and typed in the web address for the 3 credit bureaus. Leah had said to check everything. I clicked Request Report. The screen loaded. I scrolled past my student loans, past my car payment, and there it was. A credit card account with a balance of $8,000. Opened 2 years ago. The address on the account wasn't my townhome. It was my mother's house. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the scars on my arm. The pain was still there, a dull, throbbing reminder of the betrayal. But for the first time, the pain didn't feel like a burden. It felt like fuel. I wasn't just a victim of an accident. I was a crime scene, and I was going to be the detective who solved it. The healing process was not the graceful fade I had hoped for. By mid-November, the angry red blisters on my arm had settled into a landscape of shiny, irregular tissue. The skin was tight, pulling uncomfortably whenever I extended my elbow. It looked like melted wax that had hardened in the wrong shape. I stopped wearing short sleeves entirely, trading my blouses for a rotation of cardigans and blazers that hid the evidence. But the physical scarring was easier to manage than the shame. I carried a heavy, cold stone of humiliation in my gut. I had been injured in my own kitchen, at my own party, and the narrative had been stolen from me before the ambulance even arrived. I was the hysterical daughter. I was the one who fainted. I was the one who couldn't handle a simple family dinner. Every time I looked at the scar, I didn't just remember the heat. I remembered the silence of the room. I remembered how quickly the guests had looked to Lila for cues on how to react. Then came the email. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, buried between a newsletter from a furniture store and a bill notification. The subject line was simply, "Thinking of you." I opened it, my heart doing that familiar, anxious flutter that only family could provoke. "Nora," it began, "I have been giving you space because I know how overwhelmed you get when things do not go according to your plans. I just wanted to reach out and say, I hope you are healing. I know you are still upset about the accident, and I want you to know I forgive you for the way you reacted. I know your anxiety makes you interpret things intensely, and I know you do not mean to lash out. Mom says you are stressed about work and money, and I hate that for you. Let's put this behind us. Life is too short to hold on to grudges over spilled water. Love, Lila." I read it 3 times. The first time, I felt a flash of guilt. Was I overreacting? The second time, I felt confusion. The third time, I saw it for what it was. This wasn't an apology. It was a document. "I forgive you for the way you reacted." She was positioning herself as the magnanimous victim of my outburst. "Your anxiety makes you interpret things intensely." She was creating a record of my alleged mental instability. Stressed about work and money, she was planting a motive for my future behavior. If this email were ever read by a third party, a judge, a mediator, a relative, it would look like a sweet sister trying to bridge the gap with a troubled sibling. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to the folder I had named Evidence that afternoon. I sat at my dining table with my laptop and a stack of bank statements I had downloaded going back 5 years. Leah Kim, the attorney, had told me to look for financial ties. I thought I was independent, but the credit card I had found in my name suggested otherwise. I started cross-referencing. I looked at every time I had transferred money to my mother. August 12th, $500. Note: Mom car repair. September 4th, $300. Note: Mom dental copay. October 1st, $450. Note: Emergency vet bill. The pattern was consistent. Diane had a crisis. I provided the bailout. It was the rent I paid to be considered a good daughter. But then I opened a tab for the Bright Harbor Community Pantry. I had helped them with a pro bono social media campaign 2 years ago through my agency. It was a small local charity in the next town over. I knew my mother liked to attend their fundraisers because it gave her a chance to wear her pearls and drink white wine with the local gentry. I scrolled through their recent Facebook photos, looking for Lila. Since she had mentioned volunteering there, I found a photo from a gala dated 3 days after my emergency vet bill transfer. It was a picture of a donor wall. "Thank you to our silver tier donors." And there, in elegant script, was Diane Henderson. I froze. To be a silver tier donor, you had to donate at least $1,000 annually. My mother claimed she couldn't afford a $400 vet bill. She claimed she was drowning in debt. Yet here she was, pouring money into a food pantry. I dug deeper. I found their monthly newsletter. A special thanks to our events coordinator, Lila Henderson, for organizing another spectacular fall mixer. Lila wasn't just volunteering, she was on the staff list. I felt a cold prickle of suspicion. My mother was taking money from me, claiming poverty, and funneling it into an organization where Lila held a title. I needed to see this place. I called the number on the website. I used my professional voice, the one that managed 6-figure marketing budgets. "Hi, this is Nora Henderson from Kestrel and Rowe. I worked on your digital campaign a few years back. I am looking to get back into some volunteer work, specifically on the marketing side. I was wondering if I could stop by and chat with the director." An hour later, I was parking my car in the gravel lot of Bright Harbor Community Pantry. It was located in a converted warehouse in a gentrifying part of town. The building was freshly painted, with a mural of smiling vegetables on the side. I walked in. It didn't smell like a soup kitchen. It smelled like vanilla candles and floor wax. The reception area was sleek, with a receptionist who looked more like a concierge. "Nora." A man emerged from the back office, extending a hand. He was tall, wearing a vest over a dress shirt, with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Calvin Sutter." "Calvin," I said, shaking his hand. "It is good to see you." I didn't know Calvin well, but I knew his type. He was a career nonprofit climber, the kind of man who turned charity into a personal brand. "We were thrilled when you called," Calvin said, guiding me into his office. "We could always use professional eyes on our outreach." I sat down, keeping my scarred arm hidden inside my blazer sleeve. "The place looks amazing." "Calvin, you have really expanded. We have been blessed," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Great community support. I saw my sister's name on the donor board," I said casually, "and on the staff list. I didn't know she was working here." Calvin's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before reassembling. "Ah, yes, Lila. She is spirited. She handles our events. Very enthusiastic. Is it a paid position?" I asked. "Just curious how the structure works now." Calvin shifted. "It is a stipend-based role, mostly volunteer, but we cover expenses. You know how it is. We try to keep overhead low so the money goes to the food." He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. "Speaking of marketing, let me show you the brochures we just printed." He was deflecting. I watched him pull out a glossy pamphlet. On the corner of his desk, I saw a stack of invoices. I squinted. The letterhead on top said Pine and Lark Ledger. "That sounds great." "Calvin," I said, taking the brochure, "I would love to help. Maybe I could look at your budget for the upcoming year? See where we can maximize ad spend?" Calvin laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. "Oh, we have an accounting firm that handles the boring stuff. We wouldn't want to bore you with spreadsheets. We want your creative genius." He walked me out 10 minutes later. He was polite, but I felt the friction. He didn't want me looking at the numbers. He wanted me to write captions for Instagram. When I got home, Evan was sitting at my kitchen table with a highlighter and a red pen. I had asked him to come over. I put the brochure on the table. "Something is wrong there," I said. "It is too clean. And my mom is a silver donor. Evan, she took $450 from me for a vet bill and then donated to Lila's workplace." Evan looked up. He looked tired, but focused. "Did you see any paperwork?" "Just a stack of invoices on the director's desk," I said, "from a place called Pine and Lark Ledger." Evan dropped his pen. "What?" I asked. "Pine and Lark," he repeated. He sat back, running a hand through his hair. "Nora, I audited a construction firm last year. They used Pine and Lark for their payroll, and it was a mess," he said. "They are a tiny firm, basically 2 guys in a basement in West Virginia, but they specialize in creating creative expense categorizations for small businesses and nonprofits. My client fired them because they kept losing receipts for cash transactions." He pulled his laptop open. "Nonprofits have to file Form 990s publicly," he said. "If Bright Harbor is a 501c3, their financials are online." He typed rapidly. I stood behind him, watching the screen. "Here," he said, "Bright Harbor Community Pantry. Form 990 for last year." He scrolled down to the expenses section. "Look at this," he whispered. I leaned in. Under functional expenses, there was a line item for event catering and hospitality. The number was $22,000. "For a food pantry?" I asked. "That seems high." "It is astronomical for a local pantry," Evan said. "But look at the breakdown." He clicked on the supplementary schedule. There was a list of reimbursements. Reimbursement. Event supplies, $450. Reimbursement. Catering deposit, $300. Reimbursement. Vendor fee, $500. My breath hitched. "Those numbers," I said, "they match." Evan looked at me. "Match what?" "They match the withdrawals my mother made from me." I said, "The vet bill was $450. The dental copay was $300. The car repair was $500. I grabbed my bank statements and spread them out next to the screen. August 12th, I sent Diane $500. August 14th, Bright Harbor reimbursed staff $500 for vendor fee. September 4th, I sent Diane $300. September 6th, Bright Harbor reimbursed staff $300 for catering deposit. It was a cycle. Diane takes money from me. claiming an emergency. I said, my voice trembling, she gives it to the charity, maybe as a donation to get her status. Or maybe she just hands the cash to Lila. Then Lila submits a fake invoice for catering or events for the exact same amount. The charity cuts a check back to Lila. Evan nodded slowly, and the money is cleaned. It looks like a legitimate expense for the charity, lowering their taxable revenue if they had any, or just balancing their books. Diane gets the tax deduction for the donation. Lila gets the cash back as a reimbursement, which is tax-free income. And I am the source, I whispered. I am funding their money laundering operation, and I am funding my own abuse. I felt sick. It wasn't just about money. It was about the sheer architectural complexity of their exploitation. They had built a machine to harvest me. I picked up my phone. I didn't think. I just reacted. I texted Lila. I know about Pine and Lark. I know about the reimbursements matching Mom's emergencies. Does Calvin know you are cycling money? I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a text. It was a notification from Instagram. Lila Henderson mentioned you in a post. I opened the app. Lila had posted a video. She was sitting in her car, the lighting perfect, tears glistening in her eyes but not falling. Hey guys, she said to the camera. I usually keep things positive, but I have to be real for a second. It is so hard when you start succeeding. And the people who should be happiest for you are the ones who try to tear you down. I have a family member, I won't name names, who is so consumed by toxic jealousy that she is making up conspiracy theories to ruin my work at the charity. It is scary. It is honestly frightening to see someone you love spiral like this. Please send good vibes. I won't let the hate stop the mission. The caption read, when they go low, we go high. Haters' family trauma. Jealousy, mental health awareness. I felt like I had been punched. She hadn't denied it. She had weaponized it. She had taken my accusation and turned it into proof of my instability. I looked at the comments. Stay strong. Lila. Jealousy is a disease. Honey, pray for her. Wow. Sounds like she needs help. I threw the phone onto the couch. She is faster than me. I said to Evan, she is always faster. The next day at work, the fallout arrived. I was sitting in my cubicle, trying to focus on a spreadsheet for a client, when the director of HR, a woman named Karen, appeared at my entrance. Nora, do you have a moment? I followed her to her office. The walk felt like a march to the gallows. I sat in the gray fabric chair, clasping my hands to hide the scar. Karen looked uncomfortable. She shuffled some papers. Nora, we have had a concerning report. She said, report? I asked. Yes. We received an anonymous concern through our ethics portal. It suggests that you have been exhibiting erratic behavior, that you are suffering from severe stress episodes that might endanger client relationships. My mouth went dry. Lila, Karen, I said, keeping my voice steady. Is this about my personal life? Because I can assure you, the report also mentioned that you have been using company time to harass a local nonprofit. Karen interrupted, and that you have been making unfounded legal threats against community volunteers. I stared at her. The room spun slightly. Lila had called my job. She had reported me for investigating her fraud. Karen, I said, leaning forward, I am being harassed by an estranged family member. This report is part of that harassment. I am not spiraling. I am a victim of a targeted campaign to damage my reputation. Karen looked skeptical. She looked at my bandaged arm. We want to support you. Nora, she said, but we also have to protect the firm's image. If there are personal issues spilling over, maybe you should take some time. We could discuss a leave of absence. She was suggesting I go away. She was buying the narrative. I don't need a leave, I said firmly. I am doing my job. I am exceeding my targets. Just keep it outside the office, Karen said. Closing the file. We will monitor the situation. I walked back to my desk, my legs shaking. I felt like everyone was looking at me. Did they see a competent marketing manager? Or did they see the unstable woman Lila had described? I packed my bag. I couldn't stay there. Not today. I drove straight to Leah Kim's office. I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist saw my face and squeezed me in. Leah listened while I paced her small office. I told her about the reimbursements, the Pine and Lark connection, the HR meeting. "I want to sue her," I said, my voice thick with rage. "I want to sue her for defamation. I want to call the police on the charity. I want to burn it all down." Leah waited until I stopped pacing. "Sit down." "Nora," I sat. "If you sue for defamation now," Leah said calmly, "you open yourself up to discovery. They will subpoena your medical records. They will depose your mother. Diane will testify that you are emotionally fragile. Lila will bring out the texts where you sound angry. It will be a circus." "So I just let her destroy my career?" I asked. "No," Leah said. "You stop reacting. Every time you react, you give her ammunition. She wants you to explode. She wants you to storm into that charity or scream at her on Facebook. That proves her point." She handed me a tissue. "We are going to send a cease and desist," Leah said, a formal one, addressing the defamation and the workplace interference. "It is a warning shot. But for the fraud," she leaned in, "you don't fight fraud with a lawsuit. You fight it with an audit. But you need more than a hunch. You need the smoking gun. You need to know exactly how they are moving the paper." She looked at me over her glasses. "Nora, you are looking for validation from a system that is rigged against you. You want your mother to admit she stole. You want your sister to admit she is cruel. They will never do that. You have to decide what you want more, their love or the truth." I looked down at my hands. The scar on my arm was itching. I had spent my whole life buying their love. I had paid for it with tuition checks, with car repairs, with silence. And when I stopped paying, they burned me. "I don't want their love," I said. The words tasted like ash, but they also tasted true. "I want to be free of them. Then we build the wall," Leah said. That night, I went home and did something I should have done years ago. I logged into my bank account and canceled every recurring transfer. I removed my mother as an authorized user on everything. Then I opened a new document on my computer, Operation Bright Harbor. I started logging the dates, the amounts, the names. I wasn't the sister anymore. I wasn't the daughter. I was the auditor. I remembered what Evan had said about Pine and Lark. They specialize in creating creative expense categorizations. If Lila was using blank invoices, she had to be getting them from somewhere. She wasn't smart enough to create a shell company on her own. She had help. I thought about the man at the charity, Calvin Sutter. He had been evasive. He had hidden the invoices, and I thought about the board meeting coming up. I had seen the date on the calendar in Calvin's office, December 10th, open to community partners. I had 3 weeks. I picked up my phone and called Tessa, a girl I had met briefly at the pantry, who seemed less enamored with the mission and more annoyed by the workload. "Hey, Tessa," I said. "This is Nora. I met you at the front desk. I think I left my scarf there." I hadn't left a scarf, but I needed a way back in. "Oh, hi, Nora," Tessa said. She sounded bored. "I haven't seen a scarf, but it is chaos here. Lila is making us redo the entire inventory system for the holiday gala." "Is she?" I asked. "That sounds stressful. It is ridiculous." Tessa sighed. "She keeps making us sign these blank forms for volunteer hours so she can fill them in later. She says it is for a grant." My pulse jumped. Blank forms. That sounds inefficient. I said carefully, "It is shady," Tessa said, her voice dropping. "But Calvin loves her. She brings in the donations." "Tessa," I said, "I would love to buy you a coffee. I want to hear more about this grant." I hung up the phone. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I rolled up my sleeve. The scar was purple and jagged. It would never go away. It was a map of the territory I had survived. Lila thought she had buried me under a pile of lies and fake concern. She thought I was spiraling. She thought I was the fragile sister who would cry and apologize and pay the bill just to make the pain stop. She was wrong. She hadn't buried me. She had planted me. And I was about to grow into something she couldn't prune. I went to the kitchen and made tea. I moved the kettle. I placed it on the back burner, far away from the edge. I wasn't afraid of the heat anymore. I was just learning how to control the fire. The Bright Harbor Fall Gala was held in the banquet hall of a mid-range hotel off the interstate, the kind of place that smelled permanently of carpet cleaner and stale coffee. I bought a ticket under my own name, $50 for a plate of rubbery chicken and the privilege of watching my family perform their favorite play, The Saints of Suburbia. I arrived late, wearing a high-necked black dress that covered my bandages completely. I stood in the back near the beverage station, holding a glass of tepid water, and watched. The room was decorated with autumn leaves and fairy lights, cheap but effective in the dim lighting. At the front of the room, on a small stage, stood Lila. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that looked modest yet expensive, her hair pulled back in a loose, romantic bun. She held the microphone with a practiced ease, her other hand resting gently on the podium as if she were steadying herself against the weight of her own empathy. "We do not just feed bodies here at Bright Harbor," Lila said, her voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "We feed souls. We tell people that they matter, that they are seen." The audience, a mix of local business owners and retirees, applauded warmly. In the front row, at the table reserved for silver donors, sat my mother. Diane was glowing. She clapped with her hands held high, looking around the room to make sure everyone saw her. She wasn't looking at Lila with love, exactly. She was looking at her with the pride of an investor watching a stock soar. Lila was her creation, her avatar, her proof that the Henderson women were exceptional, charitable, and good. I felt a phantom throb in my left arm. It was a physical rejection of the scene before me. They looked so clean. They looked so normal. No one in this room would believe that the woman on stage had poured boiling water on her sister 3 months ago. No one would believe the woman in the front row had told the paramedics I fainted to cover it up. I scanned the room for Calvin Sutter. He was near the entrance, shaking hands with a man in a gray suit. He looked sweaty, his eyes darting around the room, checking the exits, checking the donors. He didn't look like a man running a charity. He looked like a man running a con. I didn't approach them. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there to confirm the hierarchy. And I saw it clearly. Diane was the architect, Lila was the face, and the public was the audience they needed to sustain the illusion. I had been the backstage crew, the one who paid for the lights and swept the floor, and now that I had quit, they were frantic to keep the show running. I slipped out before the speeches ended, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. 2 days later, I met Tessa Moreno at a coffee shop 3 towns over from Glen Haven. I had chosen the location carefully, somewhere Lila would never go because the lighting was bad and the coffee was cheap. Tessa was late, rushing in with a backpack slung over one shoulder. She was 22, a community college student who needed volunteer hours for her sociology degree. She looked harried, her hair in a messy ponytail. "Sorry," Tessa said, dropping into the chair opposite me. Lila had me reorganizing the pantry shelves by color, not by food type, by color. Because she wants to film a reel for Instagram later. I pushed a latte toward her. "That sounds frustrating." "It is insane," Tessa said, taking a long sip. "She treats the volunteers like her personal assistants, and Calvin just lets her do it because she brings in these checks from her mom's friends." I kept my voice neutral. "I noticed you mentioned something about forms the other day. About the grant paperwork?" Tessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, the blank ones. Yeah, it is super weird. She comes around with this clipboard whenever we have an event. It is a volunteer acknowledgement form, basically saying we worked certain hours or handled certain supplies, but the dates are always empty, and the amounts are empty." "Why does she say they are empty?" I asked. "She says she doesn't have time to fill them out in the moment," Tessa said. "She says, just sign it. Sweetie, I will fill in the admin stuff later so you can go home, and we all sign because we want to leave. But last week," Tessa paused, looking around the shop. "Last week, I saw a stack of them on her desk. She had filled them in, but she put my name down for catering setup on a Tuesday. I don't work Tuesdays, and she listed a reimbursement for food supplies that I never bought." My stomach turned over. "Did you ask her about it?" "I tried," Tessa said. "She laughed at me. She said it was just for internal tracking to maximize the budget, and that I shouldn't worry my pretty little head about accounting. I reached into my bag. Tessa, this is really important. Do you have a copy of that form? Or could you get one? Tessa hesitated. She looked at me. Really looked at me. She saw the tension in my jaw, the bandage peeking out from my sleeve. She is mean to you, isn't she? Tessa asked quietly. She hurt me. I said. I didn't elaborate. I didn't have to. Tessa reached into her backpack. She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I grabbed one when she wasn't looking. I was going to ask my professor if it was legal, but honestly, I just want to finish my hours and get out of there. She slid the paper across the table. It was a generic expense reimbursement and volunteer acknowledgement form on Bright Harbor letterhead. At the bottom, there was a signature line for the volunteer and a signature line for the events coordinator. The body of the form was blank. If I sign this, I said, staring at the paper, Lila can write in any amount she wants. She can say I bought $500 worth of shrimp. She can cut a check from the charity to reimburse me. But she doesn't give the check to the volunteer. Tessa whispered, she keeps it, or she cashes it herself because she has our info on file, or she makes up a vendor name. Thank you. Tessa, I said. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my bag. You have no idea how much this helps. I left the coffee shop feeling a mix of triumph and nausea. It was fraud. It was banal. Systematic fraud. Lila wasn't just a bully. She was a criminal. And the confidence, the sheer audacity to have volunteers sign blank forms, meant she had been doing this for a long time. She felt untouchable that evening. I showed the form to Evan. He sat at my dining table. The paper smoothed out in front of him. This is it, he said. This is the mechanism. They use real volunteers to generate the paper trail, then backfill the data to match the money they need to extract. We have them, I said, feeling a surge of adrenaline. We can go to the police now. Evan shook his head. Not yet. This proves poor record keeping. It proves she is sloppy. But unless we have the cash checks showing the money went to Lila or Diane, she can claim it was a clerical error. She can blame Tessa. She can blame you. I slammed my hand on the table. I am so tired of waiting. Evan, every day she walks around free is a day she wins. Evan stood up and walked over to me. He put his hands on my shoulders. Nora, listen to me. You are about to go to war with people who have no moral bottom. If you strike and miss, they will destroy you. You need to be bulletproof. I pulled away from him. I felt like I was vibrating. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. I was carrying so much anger it felt like a physical weight, pressing on my lungs. I think you should talk to someone, Evan said gently. Not me, a professional. You are holding on to a lot of trauma. Nora, it is going to cloud your judgment. I started seeing Dr. Maren Holt 3 days later. She was a trauma specialist with a quiet office that smelled of cedar and rain. I told her everything, the scalding, the gaslighting, the financial abuse, the blank forms. Dr. Holt listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands in her lap. You are waiting for them to act like rational people, she said. You are waiting for an aha moment where they realize they hurt you and apologize. Yes, I whispered. That is never going to happen. Doctor, Holt said. Her voice was not unkind, but it was firm. You are dealing with a system that relies on your subjugation. Your pain is not a byproduct of their dysfunction. Nora, it is the fuel. They need you to be the carrier of the chaos, so they can remain the victims. She leaned forward. You have to stop trying to win their approval. You have to accept that to save yourself, you will have to become the villain in their story. Are you ready to be the bad guy? I looked at the scars on my arm. I thought about the way Diane had looked at Lila on that stage. Yes, I said. The escalation happened a week later. I came home from work late. It was already dark, the streetlights casting long, orange shadows on the pavement. I walked up the path to my townhome, fumbling for my keys. Then I saw it. Sitting squarely in the center of my doormat was a pot. It wasn't a stock pot. It was a cheap, aluminum saucepan, the kind you buy at a dollar store, but it was filled with something. I stepped closer. my heart hammering in my throat. I turned on my phone flashlight. The pot was filled with a dried white residue. It looked like dried pasta water, or maybe starch. It was caked on the sides, flaky and gross. It was a taunt. It was a specific, terrifying message. We are thinking about the water. We are thinking about the burn. We know where you live. I dropped my keys. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet night. I called the police. I didn't know what else to do. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later. They looked bored. They looked at the pot. They looked at me. "Ma'am, did they break in?" the older officer asked. "No," I said, hugging my arms around myself. "But it is a threat. My sister burned me with a pot 3 months ago. This is her way of terrorizing me." The officer shone his flashlight on the pot. "It is just cookware. Ma'am, maybe a neighbor left it? Or a delivery mistake?" "It is not a mistake," I cried, my voice rising. "It is harassment. It is psychological warfare." The officer sighed. He wrote something in his notebook, but I could tell he wasn't really writing. "Look, unless there is a note threatening bodily harm, or unless they damaged your property, there is not much we can do. It is not illegal to leave a pot on a porch." They left. I stood there in the dark, staring at the cheap aluminum pan. I felt stripped naked. They could walk right up to my door. They could leave a symbol of my trauma on my mat. And the law saw nothing but kitchenware. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the window. The next morning, I went to Leah Kim's office. I placed a photo of the pot on her desk. "Send the letter," I said. Leah didn't argue. She drafted a formal cease and desist order. It outlined the defamation at my workplace, the harassment via the landlord, and the intimidation tactic with the pot. It stated clearly that any further contact would result in immediate legal action for a restraining order. We sent it via certified mail. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Diane. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again, 5 times in 3 minutes. Finally, I answered. I put it on speaker and set my recording app to on. "Hello, Mother. How dare you?" Diane screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was a guttural, animal sound. "A courier? You sent a courier to your sister's house? She is harassing me. Mom, I am protecting myself. You are attacking this family." Diane shrieked. "You are trying to destroy everything we have built. Lila is hysterical. She is throwing up. How could you be so cruel? She put a pot on my porch," I said calmly. "She called my boss. She is worried about you," Diane yelled. "And this is how you repay us? After everything I have done for you? After I paid for your college?" "You didn't pay for my college," I said. "I paid for it. I am still paying the loans." There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. "You are ungrateful," Diane hissed. "You are a selfish, lying girl. And I will tell you this, Nora, if you do not withdraw that legal threat immediately, you are cut out. Do you hear me? Cut out of everything. You will not see a dime." "A dime of what?" I asked. "You are broke. Mom, you borrow money from me every month." Diane laughed. It was a cold, wet sound. "You have no idea what I have, but you will never touch it." She hung up. I sat there, the adrenaline fading into a cold clarity. "You have no idea what I have." What did she have? I called Aunt Elaine. Elaine was my father's sister. She lived in Ohio and rarely spoke to Diane. They had tolerated each other for my father's sake, but after he died, the drift had become a chasm. "Nora?" Elaine sounded surprised. "Is everything okay? I need to ask you something." "Aunt Elaine," I said, "it is about money." Elaine sighed. "Did Diane ask you for a loan?" "Tell her I said no." "No." I said, "I want to know about when I went to college. Mom always says she paid for it, but I took out loans. She keeps bringing it up like she made some huge sacrifice." Elaine was silent for a long time. "Nora," she said finally, "you know about your grandfather's trust, right?" "My grandfather?" "No, Diane's father." Elaine said, "When he passed, right before you started at the university, he left a small inheritance. It wasn't millions, but it was something, maybe $40,000 or $50,000. He left it specifically for his grandchildren's education. I felt the blood drain from my face. Diane was the executor. Elaine continued. She told the family she used it to pay your tuition. That was the story. She said, Nora's school is so expensive, it ate up the whole trust. I never saw a penny. I whispered, I worked at the cafeteria. I took out federal loans. Elaine gasped. Oh, honey, I always wondered. She bought that new car right around that time, and she renovated the kitchen. The pieces slammed together. The kitchen renovation. The Honda Accord she had driven home one day, claiming she got a great deal. She stole it. I said, she stole my inheritance, spent it on herself, and then spent the next 10 years gaslighting me into believing she had sacrificed for me. She made me feel guilty for money she stole from me. That was the pattern. It wasn't just chaos. It was extraction. Diane used crises to extract money. Lila used image to extract sympathy. And I was the mine they were stripping. I hung up with Elaine and stared at the wall. The cease and desist wasn't enough. A restraining order wasn't enough. They had stolen my past. They were stealing my present. I called Evan. I need to know about Grant Voss. I said, Grant was Lila's boyfriend, or at least, the man she posted photos with. He was a consultant, a vague term that usually meant he owned a laptop and a suit. Evan came over with his laptop. We sat on the living room floor, surrounded by papers. I did some digging on Pine and Lark Ledger. Evan said, the firm is registered in West Virginia. Like I said, but look at the annual report filing. He turned the screen toward me. Registered agent. Grant Voss. He owns the accounting firm. I said, he is the accounting firm. Evan corrected, it is a shell. And look at his LinkedIn. He lists himself as a strategic partner for nonprofits. He is in on it. I said, Lila gets the job at the pantry. Grant sets up the fake vendor invoices through his shell company. Diane donates the seed money, my money, to make it look legitimate. They cycle the cash, skimming off the top, and using the tax write-offs. It is a closed loop, Evan said, a family business. And the scalding? I asked. Evan looked at me. His eyes were sad. Nora, you were asking questions about the debt. You were starting to say no to the money requests. You were becoming a liability. The scalding. It wasn't just an accident, and it wasn't just Lila being mean. It was a warning shot. I finished. It was an attempt to traumatize me back into submission, to make me so broken and focused on my own pain that I wouldn't look at the books. It almost worked. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the spot where the pot had been. I am done playing defense. I said, What are you going to do? Evan asked. The Bright Harbor Board meets next Tuesday. I said, It is open to community partners. You are going to the meeting? I am going to the meeting. I said, and I'm going to bring the audit. Evan stood up. He looked worried. Lila will be there. She will have home field advantage. She will spin it. She will say you are crazy. I know. I said, I turned to face him. I let the light from the street lamp catch the side of my face, illuminating the jawline that I usually kept hidden. Let her try to spin this. I said, I spent the next 3 days preparing. I didn't sleep much. I printed the emails. I printed the bank statements. I printed the blank form Tessa had given me. I printed the corporate filing for Pine and Lark Ledger showing Grant's name. I organized them into 5 identical binders. I wasn't going there to scream. I wasn't going there to cry. I was going there to do the one thing my family had never done in their entire lives. I was going to tell the truth. On the morning of the meeting, I dressed in a navy blue suit. I didn't wear a bandage on my arm. I let the scar show. It was angry, red, and undeniable. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see the little girl who tried to please everyone. I didn't see the victim who fainted. I saw the prosecutor. I picked up the binders. They were heavy. Let's go. I said to the empty room. I walked out the door, stepping over the place where the pot had sat, and got into my car. The engine started with a roar. I drove toward the charity, toward the sister who tried to burn me, and toward the mother who sold me out. I was coming for my refund. The conference room at Bright Harbor Community Pantry was smaller than I expected. A windowless rectangle with a laminate table that had seen better days. The air smelled of dry erase markers and old dust. There were 5 board members present, 3 men in business casual attire, and 2 women who looked like they were missing a bridge game. Calvin Sutter sat at the head of the table, his smile fixed and brittle, like a piece of tape trying to hold a cracking windshield together. I sat at the opposite end. I had taken off my blazer. My left arm was bare. The scarring was in its ugly purple phase, a topographical map of trauma that ran from my elbow to my wrist. I saw the board member's eyes dart to it, then quickly away. Embarrassed by the violence written on my skin, I didn't hide it. I rested my arm on the table, right next to the thick binders I had prepared. "Thank you for seeing me," I said. My voice was calm, pitched low. "I am here as a concerned community partner." Calvin cleared his throat. "Nora, we appreciate your interest, but the board usually handles internal financial reviews. I am not sure why we needed this emergency session." I opened the first binder. Because, Calvin, what I found isn't internal. It involves external vendors, tax filings, and potential liability for every person in this room. I slid a copy of the spreadsheet toward the board chair. A gray-haired man named Mr. Albright, who owned the local hardware store. "If you look at tab 1, I said, "you will see a series of reimbursements made to the events coordinator over the last 18 months. They are coded as catering or vendor fees. They total nearly $24,000. Mr. Albright put on his reading glasses. "That is a lot for snacks," he muttered. I turned the page. "If you look at tab 2, you will see the personal bank withdrawals of a private donor. Diane Henderson. The dates and amounts match the reimbursements almost exactly. The donor withdraws $500 on a Tuesday. The charity reimburses the coordinator $500 on a Thursday. One of the women, Mrs. Gable, frowned. Are you saying the donor is being paid back? That would mean the donation isn't a donation. That is tax fraud. It is worse, I said. I directed them to the corporate filing for Pine and Lark Ledger. The accounting firm you use to verify these expenses is owned by Grant Voss. Grant Voss is the domestic partner of your events coordinator. Calvin stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. You are twisting standard operating procedures. We use local vendors to support the community. Using a shell company owned by a staff member's boyfriend to process invoices isn't supporting the community. Calvin, I said, not looking up from my papers, it is money laundering. The room went silent. The phrase money laundering hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Mr. Albright looked at Calvin. His face was no longer friendly. Calvin, is this true? Mr. Albright asked, who is Pine and Lark? Before Calvin could answer, the door swung open. Lila stood there. She was wearing a soft pink sweater and jeans, looking breathless and flushed, as if she had run all the way there. Her eyes were wide, brimming with instant tears. I am so sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice trembling. Calvin texted me that there was a situation. She looked at me, and then she let out a small, wounded gasp. She pressed a hand to her chest. Nora, she whispered, what are you doing? I didn't look at her. Mr. Albright, please ask Ms. Henderson to explain the blank volunteer forms in tab 3. Lila rushed into the room, ignoring the protocol. She stood behind Calvin's chair, gripping the back of it like a shield. Please, you have to listen to me, Lila pleaded, addressing the board. My sister, she hasn't been right. Not since the accident. She gestured vaguely toward my arm. She has been spiraling. Lila continued, a tear slipping down her cheek. She is obsessed. She thinks everyone is out to get her. She's been harassing my mother, harassing my boyfriend. I tried to get her help, but she just gets more paranoid. She is making all this up to punish me. Mr. Albright looked uncomfortable. He looked from Lila's tear-streaked face to my scarred arm. The narrative was shifting. I could feel it. The sympathy in the room was gravitational, pulling toward the crying girl in the pink sweater. She is in pain, Lila sobbed. and she is trying to destroy the one thing that brings me joy, because she can't stand seeing me happy. It is a vendetta. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest, the urge to scream, to defend myself, to call her a liar, but I heard Leah Kim's voice in my head. Stop reacting. I didn't scream. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I connected it to the wireless casting dongle on the television screen mounted on the wall. The code appeared on the screen. I typed it in. I am not here to talk about my feelings. Lila, I said, I am here to talk about the facts. But since you brought up the accident, I pressed play. The video Maya had taken appeared on the large screen. It was grainy, focused on the background, but the movement was undeniable. The room watched as pixelated Lila stood by the stove. They watched her look over her shoulder, checking the room. They watched her grab the heavy stock pot with both hands and slide it deliberately from the safe back burner to the precarious edge of the counter. They watched her lean her hip against the counter next to it, waiting. I paused the video right at the moment she settled into position. Lila stopped crying. Her face went slack. Mr. Albright stared at the screen. That looks like you moved it, he said. You told us it was already on the edge. Lila's eyes darted around the room. I was stirring it. I was moving it to stir it. You moved a boiling pot to the edge of a counter in a crowded room while your mother's back was turned? Mrs. Gable asked. Her voice was sharp. That looks dangerous. Dear, that looks staged. It was not staged, Lila snapped. The sweetness evaporated instantly. Her voice turned shrill. You are manipulating them. Nora, you are editing things. I disconnected the phone and turned back to the binders. The video is just for context, I said, to show that perhaps Ms. Henderson's version of events is not always reliable, but the numbers in front of you do not have an angle. They are just math. I pointed to the blank form Tessa had given me. Ms. Henderson, I said, looking her in the eye for the first time. Can you explain why you ask volunteers to sign blank reimbursement forms? Lila's face turned a mottled red. She looked at Calvin, but he was staring at his shoes. She looked at the board, but they were looking at the binders. I do that to save time, she yelled. We are busy. We are saving the world while you sit in your corporate office and judge us. She slammed her hand on the table. You are just jealous, she screamed. You have always been jealous. Mom loves me more, and you can't stand it. You are trying to burn this place down because you are a sad, lonely, bitter bitch. The silence that followed was absolute. The board members looked shocked. The mask had slipped, and underneath the charitable saint was a cornered animal. Mr. Albright cleared his throat. He closed the binder. I think we have seen enough, he said. Lila, Calvin, could you please step outside? The board needs to deliberate. Lila looked at me with pure hatred. She didn't look sad anymore. She looked dangerous. She spun on her heel and stormed out. Calvin followed her, looking like a man walking to his execution. 10 minutes later, Mr. Albright called me back in. Ms. Henderson, he said formally, the board has voted to immediately freeze all reimbursement accounts. We are placing Calvin Sutter and Lila Henderson on administrative leave pending a full third-party forensic audit. We will be contacting the authorities regarding the irregularities you have highlighted. Thank you, I said. I gathered my binders. I walked out of the building. My legs felt like jelly. I sat in my car and gripped the steering wheel, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I had done it. I had pulled the thread. But as I drove away, I checked my rearview mirror. Lila's car was still in the lot. She was sitting in the driver's seat, talking frantically on her phone. She wasn't crying. She was planning. The retaliation arrived 48 hours later. I was at my desk at Kestrel and Rowe, trying to catch up on the work I had missed while preparing for the board meeting. My email pinged. It was a meeting invite from the chief financial officer and the head of legal. Subject: urgent personnel matter. I walked into the glass-walled office feeling a sense of déjà vu. The CFO, a stern man named Mr. Davids, did not offer me a seat. Nora, we received a disturbing communication this morning, he said, An anonymous whistleblower provided us with documents alleging that you have been diverting marketing funds from client budgets into a personal consulting firm. My stomach dropped. A personal consulting firm. It was exactly what Lila had done. She was projecting her crime onto me. That is a lie. I said, I don't have a consulting firm. The email included invoices. Mr. David said, from a vendor called NH Strategies. The whistleblower claims you created false vendor profiles to siphon off 5% of the ad spend for the TechCorp account. I felt dizzy. TechCorp was my biggest client. This is retaliation. I said, my voice rising. I just exposed my sister for doing exactly this at a local charity. She is mirroring the accusation to discredit me. Mr. Davids held up a hand. We are not judging the validity yet, but given the seriousness of the allegation, embezzlement is a felony, we have to follow protocol. You are being placed on unpaid administrative leave pending an internal investigation. He slid a paper across the desk. We need your badge and your laptop. Security will escort you out. I stood there, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I had worked at this agency for 6 years. I was the first one in, the last one out. I had built that department, and now, because of a lie typed into a hushmail account, I was being treated like a criminal. I handed over my badge. I handed over my laptop. The walk to the elevator was the longest walk of my life. My coworkers watched. Greg, the man Lila had messaged, looked down at his desk as I passed. They saw the security guard behind me. They saw the box of personal items in my hands. The narrative was complete. Nora Henderson was unstable, and now, Nora Henderson was a thief. I sat in my car in the parking garage and screamed. I screamed until my throat felt like it was bleeding. I hit the steering wheel until my palms ached. I drove straight to Evan's apartment. I collapsed onto his sofa. Still wearing my coat. She took my job. I whispered, she actually took my job. Evan paced the room. He was furious. His calm auditor demeanor was gone. This is war. Nora, you have to go public. You have to post the video. You have to post the audit findings. Put it all on social media. Burn her down before she burns you. I shook my head, curling into a ball. I can't. Why? Evan demanded. Why are you protecting her? I am not protecting her, I cried. I am protecting me. If I post that stuff, I look like the crazy sister. I look like I am engaging in a Facebook feud. I want to be the professional. I want to be the grown-up. Being the grown-up is getting you killed, Evan said darkly. I went to see Dr. Holt the next morning. I felt fragile, like a piece of glass that had been dropped and glued back together wrong. I told her about the job. I told her about Evan's advice. I feel like if I fight back publicly, I become her. I said, I become the drama. Dr. Holt looked at me. Nora, imagine someone is breaking into your house with a knife. If you pick up a bat to defend yourself, does that make you a violent person? No, I said. You have been trained to believe that your silence is a virtue, she said. You have been trained to believe that defending yourself is an act of aggression. That is how abusers keep their victims quiet. They convince you that speaking up is mean. She leaned forward. Filing a lawsuit is not mean. It is legal boundaries. Filing a police report is not dramatic. It is citizenship. You are not creating drama. You are documenting reality. Do not confuse self-defense with cruelty. I left her office and drove to the police station. The desk sergeant looked up as I approached. I had my binder. I would like to file a report for criminal harassment and filing a false report. I said, I laid out the evidence, the cease and desist letter, the vandalism with the pot, the fraudulent report to my employer, this time, because I had the cease and desist trail. They took it seriously. They gave me a case number. Then I went to Leah Kim's office. Leah looked at the termination letter from my job. She looked at the police report. Okay, she said. She cracked her knuckles. We are done with warnings. She pulled up a document on her screen. We are filing a civil suit. Leah said, we are naming Lila Henderson and Diane Henderson. We are suing for battery regarding the scalding. We are suing for defamation regarding the workplace interference. We are suing for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and we are suing for the recovery of the misappropriated inheritance funds under a theory of unjust enrichment. Is it too much? I asked. Is it an exaggeration? Leah turned the screen toward me. Look at the damages. Nora, medical bills, $12,000, lost wages, 6 months of salary, therapy costs. This isn't an exaggeration. It is a bill. They broke it. They bought it. I signed the retainer. My hand didn't shake. That evening, I went to Maya's house. Maya was the only one who had seen the smirk. She was the witness who started it all. She made me tea. We sat on her back porch, wrapped in blankets against the December chill. I lost my job. I told her. Maya reached out and squeezed my hand. I am so sorry. Nora, Lila is a monster. I looked out at the dark yard. The wind was stripping the last leaves from the trees. You know what hurts the most? I asked softly. The burns? Maya asked. No. I pulled the blanket tighter around me. It was the moment right after it happened. I was on the floor. I was screaming. My skin was peeling off, and everyone looked at Lila. I closed my eyes, remembering the scene. Mom went to check the floor for damage. Lila started crying about how scared she was. And the guests. They comforted her. They patted her back. They told her it was an accident. I took a shaky breath. I was the one bleeding. Maya. But she was the one who got the hug. Maya moved closer, wrapping her arm around my shoulders. I realized then, I said, opening my eyes, I was never a person to them. I was a prop. I was the supporting character in the Lila show. If I was hurt, it was only relevant because of how it made Lila feel. I looked at Maya. I will never hand them my pain again, I said. They don't get to consume it. They don't get to use my grief to feed their ego. I am closing the kitchen. Maya rested her head on my shoulder. What are you going to do now? She asked. I am going to wait, I said. For what? For the audit to finish. I said, and for the lawsuit to land on their doorstep. I looked down at my scar. It was silver in the moonlight. I am not the peacemaker anymore. Maya, I am the reckoning. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and silence. I didn't answer Diane's calls. I didn't look at Lila's Instagram. I lived off my savings. I spent my days helping Evan organize the evidence for the forensic auditor the charity had hired. Then, 3 days before Christmas, the phone rang. It wasn't Diane. It wasn't Lila. It was Calvin Sutter. Nora, he said. His voice sounded wrecked, rough, like he hadn't slept in a week. I didn't say anything. I just wanted you to know, he said. I resigned. Okay, I said. And the auditors found the checking account, he said. The one Grant set up. I waited. They are referring it to the district attorney. Calvin whispered. They are talking about grand larceny charges. For all of us. He paused. Lila is telling everyone it was my idea. He said, she is throwing me under the bus. Nora. She is telling the police I forced her to sign those checks. I looked at the phone. I felt a cold, distant pity. She does that. Calvin. I said, she rewrites the story until she is the victim. You should have checked the pot before you stood next to it. I hung up. I walked to the window. Snow was starting to fall, dusting the street in white. It covered the spot on the porch where the pot had been. The war wasn't over. The lawsuit was just beginning. I had no job. I had a permanent scar. My family was imploding. But as I watched the snow fall, I realized something. I wasn't afraid. For 33 years, I had been terrified of upsetting them, terrified of the conflict, terrified of being unloved. But the worst had happened. They had burned me. They had robbed me. They had tried to destroy me. And I was still standing. I went to the kitchen. I made myself a sandwich. I stood in the center of the room, eating it quietly. The silence in the house wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was mine. The independent audit of Bright Harbor Community Pantry was not a dramatic event. It was a slow, grinding process of forensic accounting that took place in a small conference room I was no longer invited to enter. I sat on a bench outside the building for 2 hours on a Tuesday, answering questions from a man named Mr. Henderson, no relation, who asked me to verify dates and signatures. He showed me photocopies of the blank forms I had flagged. He showed me the invoices from Pine and Lark Ledger. He didn't gasp. He didn't look shocked. He just made small, precise check marks in his notebook. While the auditors worked in silence, Lila went to work on the internet. Her campaign was a masterclass in weaponized victimhood. She didn't name me directly, but she didn't have to. She posted long, tearful videos about the pain of being targeted by a family member with severe mental health struggles. She used keywords like obsessed, vendetta, and delusional. She posted a photo of herself looking out a window with a caption that read, "It is so hard when someone you love tries to destroy the good work you do because they cannot handle their own darkness. Praying for peace, praying for protection." The comments were a chorus of support. "Stay strong. Lila. Jealousy is such an ugly color on people. Keep shining your light." I read them all. I didn't respond. I printed them. I added them to the binder labeled defamation. Every like, every share, every sympathetic comment was just another brick in the wall of evidence I was building. I wasn't fighting a public relations war. I was fighting a legal one. My own war at Kestrel and Rowe finally came to a ceasefire 3 weeks later. I was summoned back to the office of Mr. Davids, the CFO. This time, there was no security guard waiting to escort me out. "We have concluded our investigation." Mr. David said. He didn't smile. "The vendor NH Strategies does not exist in any of our payment systems. The invoices sent to us were crude forgeries. The metadata on the file suggests they were created on a mobile device, not a workstation." He pushed a piece of paper across the desk. It was a reinstatement letter. "We apologize for the disruption." "Nora," he said stiffly, "you are cleared to return to your duties immediately." I looked at the letter. I looked at the glass wall of his office. I could see the marketing floor. I could see the heads of my coworkers bobbing above their cubicles. They knew I had been escorted out. They had heard the rumors about embezzlement. An apology from a CFO didn't scrub the stain of suspicion. If I went back to my old desk, I would just be the woman who might have stolen money. The woman with the crazy sister and the drama. I cannot go back to that team. I said, "Mr. Davids blinked. "Excuse me? My reputation has been damaged," I said calmly. "Even though I am innocent, the optics are compromised. I want to transfer. I want to move to the data analytics division on the 4th floor. But that is a non-client-facing role," he said. "It is back-end work. It would be a lateral move. Maybe even a step down in visibility." "Exactly," I said. "I want a role where my output is measured in code and reports, not in relationships. I want to be invisible for a while." He agreed. I packed up my desk that afternoon. I didn't say goodbye to Greg. I didn't explain myself to anyone. I took my plants and my stapler, and I moved to a quiet cubicle in the back of the 4th floor. It felt like hiding, but Dr. Holt reminded me it was strategic. I was fortifying my position. I was removing myself from the battlefield where Lila could hurt me. The pressure from Diane started a week later. She didn't scream this time. She showed up at my townhome unannounced. It was raining. A cold, miserable drizzle that turned the Maryland suburbs gray. I opened the door to find her standing there, holding a dripping umbrella. She looked older. The lines around her mouth were etched deep. "Nora," she said, "can I come in?" I didn't step back. "You can stand in the entryway. I am not making tea." She stepped inside, shaking the water off her coat. She looked around my living room as if searching for wiretaps. "You have to stop this," she said. Her voice was low, trembling. "Stop what?" I asked. "The audit," she said. "The lawsuit, the police reports. You have to stop it all." I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. My scar itched in the damp weather. "I cannot stop an independent audit. Mom, the board ordered it." "You can tell them it was a misunderstanding," Diane pleaded. She reached out to touch my arm, but I flinched, and she pulled back. "You can tell them you were confused. You can retract your statement." "Why would I do that?" "Because you are ruining us," she cried. Her composure cracked. "Do Do you know what happens if they look too deep? It is not just Lila. It is me. My name is on those donations, and your name is on the withdrawals that funded them. I said. Diane's face went white. You know about that? I know everything. Mom, I know you took money from me for emergencies that didn't exist. I know you funneled it to the charity so Lila could cash it out through Grant's shell company. I know I was the bank for your little money laundering scheme. It wasn't stealing, Diane insisted. It was keeping the family afloat. Lila needed the help. She doesn't have your stability. Nora, she needs support. So you burned me to keep her warm? I asked. I didn't burn you, Diane snapped. That was an accident. Why can you not let that go? It is the money, isn't it? You are so stingy. You always have been. You count every penny. I count every penny because I had to pay for my own life while you stole my inheritance. I said. Diane froze. I spoke to Aunt Elaine. I said, I know about grandfather's trust. I know you spent it. Diane waved a hand dismissively. Elaine is a bitter old woman. That money, it went to household expenses. It went to keeping a roof over your head. You told me you paid my tuition. I said, you lied for 10 years. I did what I had to do. Diane yelled. I am your mother. It is your duty to help this family. You should be grateful I raised you. And now look at you, trying to send your own mother to jail over some paperwork. She was shaking. But it wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of exposure. I am in debt. Nora, she whispered. Her voice dropped to a terrified hiss. Real debt, not just the credit cards. I borrowed money from people I shouldn't have borrowed from. To help Lila with her lifestyle. If this audit comes out, if the police get involved, I cannot pay them back. I looked at her. I saw a woman who had dug a hole so deep she had thrown her children in to fill it. That sounds like a you problem, I said. Diane stared at me. Her eyes went cold. If I go down, she said softly, I will take you with me. You think you are clean? You think your credit is safe? What does that mean? I asked. Diane didn't answer. She just smiled. A thin, cruel curvature of her lips. She turned and walked out into the rain. I called Aunt Elaine immediately. Elaine, I said, I need you to tell me everything you know about Diane's finances. She is desperate, Elaine said. She has been shuffling debt for 30 years. But Nora, check your credit report again. Not just the open accounts. Check the closed ones. Check the addresses. I spent that night on the phone with the fraud department of 3 different credit bureaus. It took 4 hours. I had to answer security questions about cars I never owned and addresses I never lived at. Finally, a representative named Sarah came back on the line. Ms. Henderson. She said, I found an archive file. It looks like there was a line of credit opened in your name 7 years ago. It was maxed out at $20,000 and then charged off as bad debt. 7 years ago. I was 26. What was the address on the application? I asked. It is listed as... Sarah paused. It is listed as your mother's address, and the contact number is ending in 4545. That was Diane's cell phone number. She had opened a credit line in my name, run it up to $20,000, and then let it default. She had destroyed a piece of my financial history before I even knew I had it. That was why my interest rates were always slightly higher. That was why I had been rejected for that car loan 3 years ago. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. This wasn't just a dysfunctional family, it was a parasitic organism. Diane had been feeding on me since I was a child. The scalding wasn't an anomaly. It was just the first time the violence had been physical instead of financial. I had a choice. I could stay quiet and pay off the debt to save my mother from prison, or I could file an affidavit of identity theft and send the police to her door. The stakes were razor sharp. If I prosecuted her, I was the daughter who jailed her mom. If I didn't, I was agreeing to be her victim forever. I needed to look Lila in the eye. I needed to know if there was anything human left in her. I texted her, meet me at the grind in Glen Haven, tomorrow, 10 in the morning. If you don't come, I released the video to the news. She replied instantly. Fine. I met Leah Kim before the meeting. She handed me a small digital recorder. Maryland is a two-party consent state for recording, Leah warned. You have to tell her you are recording. If she stays and talks, she has consented. What is the goal here? I asked. The goal is to get her to admit the intent. Leah said, we have the fraud, we have the harassment, but for the battery case, for the burns, we need her to say she did it on purpose, or at least that she enjoyed it. The cafe was busy. The clatter of espresso machines provided a layer of noise. I chose a table in the back corner. Lila arrived 10 minutes late. She wore sunglasses and a headscarf, like a celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi. She sat down and didn't take off the glasses. You look terrible, she said. I put the recorder on the table. I pressed the red button. I am recording this conversation. Lila, I said, for my records. If you want to leave, leave now. Lila looked at the recorder. She sneered. You are so dramatic, always with the receipts. She didn't leave. What do you want? Nora? She asked. To gloat? I want to know why. I said, why what? Why you burned me? Lila sighed. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were rimmed with red. But they were hard. It was an accident, she said. It wasn't. I said, I have the video. I saw you move the pot. Maya saw you smirk. Lila laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. Maya, that little follower, she would say anything you told her to. I leaned forward. Why, Lila, was it because I wouldn't lend you the money for the car? Was it because Evan liked me? Lila picked up a sugar packet and began to tear it into tiny strips. You think you are so perfect, she said quietly. You think because you have a job and a 401k, and you pay your bills that you are better than us. You sit there in your clean house and you judge us. You judge Mom. You judge me. I don't judge you. I said, I supported you. I gave you thousands of dollars. You gave it to make yourself feel superior. Lila hissed. You gave it so you could look down on us. Poor Lila. Poor Mom. Let Saint Nora fix it. She looked up. Her eyes were full of venom. I wanted to see you break, she said. The words hung in the air. I wanted to see if you were actually human. Lila continued. You are always so composed, so responsible. I wanted to see you scream. I wanted to see you messy. So you poured boiling water on me? I wanted to knock you off your pedestal, she said. And you know what? It worked. You screamed like a banshee. You looked ugly. You looked weak, she smiled. It was the same smirk Maya had described. And the best part? She whispered. Everyone rushed to me. Even when you were bleeding. I was the most important person in the room. That is the natural order. Nora, you are the worker bee. I am the queen. I looked at her. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt nothing. She was a hollow shell filled with battery acid. You should have just forgiven me, Lila said, her voice turning petulant. If you had just said, it is okay, and moved on, none of this would be happening. We would still be a family. But you had to make it a thing. You had to have boundaries. That was it. The confession. It wasn't about the water. It was about the boundary. The scalding was a compliance test. Will you let me hurt you and thank me for it? My answer is no. I said. I picked up the recorder. I stopped the tape. I am leaving now. Lila. I said. Run away. She taunted. Go back to your sad little life. I stood up. I am not running away. I am moving forward. And you are not coming with me. I walked out of the cafe. I felt lighter than I had in years. The end came fast after that. 2 days after Christmas, the audit results were finalized. Mr. Albright sent me a copy of the executive summary. Findings. 1. Unauthorized disbursements totaling $24,300 to unverified vendors. 2. Collusion between events coordinator and external accounting firm Pine and Lark Ledger. 3. Falsified volunteer records. 4. Discrepancies in donor intake matching disbursement cycles. The board acted immediately. Calvin Sutter was allowed to resign in disgrace. Lila was fired for cause. The findings were turned over to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution for fraud and embezzlement. I was sitting in my new cubicle when my phone rang. It was Lila. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. Nora. She sobbed. It sounded real this time. Panic, raw and unpolished. What is it? Lila? The police were here, she choked out. They came to the apartment. They took my laptop. They took Grant's computer. They said I am a person of interest. Okay, I said. You have to fix this, she screamed. You started this. You have to tell them it was a mistake. You have to tell them Mom authorized the donations. I cannot fix this. Lila. It is out of my hands. It is the law. But I could go to jail, she wailed. Nora, please. I am your sister. You cannot let me go to jail. I looked at the scar on my arm. You should have thought about that before you cooked the books. I said, Nora, please. I am scared. I hung up. I blocked the number. The final confrontation happened at Diane's house. I received a formal letter from Diane's attorney, a cheap strip mall lawyer she must have hired with the last of her credit. It demanded a meeting to settle all outstanding family disputes. I brought Leah Kim. We drove to the house I grew up in. It looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling. The gutters were full of leaves. Diane was sitting at the dining room table. She looked haggard. There were stacks of paper everywhere. Sit down, she commanded. I sat. Leah sat next to me, opening her briefcase. I have prepared a statement, Diane said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. It says that the credit card account was a misunderstanding authorized by you verbally. It says that the donations to the charity were gifts. And it says that you withdraw your police report regarding the harassment. She looked at me. Her eyes were desperate. If you sign this, she said, we can make the legal problems go away. I can tell the DA it was a family dispute. And if I don't? I asked. Diane slammed her hand on the table. If you don't, you are dead to me, she said. I will write you out of the will. What is left of it? I will tell everyone you are a liar. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are alone. I picked up the paper. I read it. It was a lie. It was a confession of my own non-existent guilt. I looked at the kitchen where she used to cook dinner. I looked at the stairs where I used to play. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. You stole my identity, I said quietly. You stole my inheritance. You let your daughter burn me, and then you helped her cover it up. I did what I had to do to survive. Diane screamed. You were always the strong one. Nora, you could handle it. Lila is weak. She needed the money. You didn't need it. You are selfish. Selfish? I asked. Yes. Diane stood up, knocking her chair over. You are a selfish, ungrateful, cold-hearted bitch. I gave you life. You owe me. You are disposable. Nora, you exist to help this family. If you are not helping, you are nothing. Disposable. The word hung there. It was the truth she had been hiding for 33 years. I wasn't a daughter. I was a resource. I was a battery. And now that I had stopped providing power, I was trash. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I am not disposable. I said, I am the evidence. I didn't sign the paper. I left it on the table. Come on. Leah, I said. We walked out of the house. Diane was screaming after us. You will regret this. You will die alone. You are nothing without us. I walked down the driveway. The winter air was biting cold. It stung my cheeks. It felt clean. I stood by my car. I looked back at the house one last time. I saw the silhouette of my mother in the window, watching me. I reached into my bag. I pulled out 2 envelopes. One contained the civil lawsuit filing, ready to be submitted to the court clerk. It would trigger a war that would last for years. It would drag my family through the mud. It would cost thousands of dollars, but it would be justice. The other envelope contained a lease application for an apartment in a city 3 hours away, a fresh start, a place where nobody knew my name, a place where I could just be Nora, not the victim, not the prosecutor. My phone lit up in my hand. It was Lila calling from a borrowed number. I looked at the screen. I looked at the 2 envelopes. The lawsuit would burn them down. The lease would let me walk away. Justice or peace. The scar on my arm throbbed in the cold. It would never go away. It was part of me now. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of snow and exhaust fumes. I made my choice. I didn't answer the phone. I opened the car door and tossed one envelope into the passenger seat. I dropped the other one into the trash can by the curb. I got in the car. I turned the key. I drove away, leaving the house, the screams, and the pot of boiling water behind me. I didn't look back. I just drove. Thank you so much for listening to At My Birthday Party. My sister scalded me with boiling water from the pot. I hope Nora's journey of discovering her own strength resonated with you. It's a heavy story about boundaries, family, and the hard choices we sometimes have to make to save ourselves. I would love to know, where are you listening from today? Please leave a comment down below and let me know which country or city you are tuning in from. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more realistic, emotional dramas like this, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. It really helps the channel grow. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Nora's final choice? Which envelope do you think she kept? Share your theories in the comments in English. I read them all. Stay safe, and see you in the next story.